This is one of my favorite parables. Part of that is because of the content. This is a parable about a young son who lives on his father's estate, where there is enough and more than enough. Or even the servants, the people at the bottom of the pecking order, have more than enough bread. They've got enough to spare, they've got enough to share. And he's happy there. But he looks out at the world and he says, I want to go make my way in the world. I want to go make a name for myself, be my own person, with nothing more than the vast fortune that my father can give to me. So he goes to his dad and says, you've got enough and more than enough. Can you give some of that to me and I'll go out into the world and make my name? And his father says, sure, here you go. And he goes out into the world and he puts his trust in that vast fortune. And he learns that you can't quite rely even on vast fortunes. Not in the end. I mean, it might seem like there are folks who really don't have to worry. Elon Musk is going to be fine. But eventually, the money can't help anymore. And this young son learns that quickly. He is maybe not the best budgeter, the greatest planner. He spends the money. He ends up having to work for a pig farmer, and his option for food is the pig's food, which is especially bad if you're Jewish and pigs are off limits, but is not great for anyone. And so he wonders, what can I do? Can I go back to my father's estate? I mean, I took his money and wasted it. He's not going to welcome me back, but maybe I can go back and I can get a job. I can be one of the hired hands. I can be one of the servants. They've got enough and more than enough. They've got bread enough and more to spare. I'll go back and I'll do that. And he heads back to his father's estate and begs to be let back in, even as a servant, and his father welcomes him with open arms. You're my son. Of course you can come back. This young son who wasn't sure what to expect finds hospitality and welcome and generosity and celebration. There's also, of course, the older brother who is jealous that this celebration is happening, but his dad explains, you've been here the whole time. You have always had enough and more than enough. Everything I have has been yours the entire time. So stop being mad about it and come celebrate. And he does. That's the content. I also like this parable because of the context. You see, when Jesus tells this parable and a couple others that are kind of similar about lost things being found, he is sitting and eating with sinners, with the kind of people who a nice, respectable rabbi does not sit and eat with. And some folks, some Pharisees, some religious people are saying, look at this guy, he eats with sinners. What's up with that? And Jesus could deliver a theological treatise. He could give a speech. He could lay out a systematic theology about inside and outside and about God's welcome for all. But he doesn't. He tells stories. And those stories invite everyone who hears them to think about who they are in them. If we're talking about people being lost and then people being found, are we talking about the sinners who Jesus eats with, who have to rely on nothing but God's grace? Or are we talking about the Pharisees and the religious folks and the people with power and privilege and prestige, who might be relying on the vast fortunes that they inherited from their parents and who might need to learn to rely on God's grace? Everybody who is there gets to think about who they are. And everybody there gets to think about who they are at different times, because we're not always one person in this story. Sometimes we are the young son. Sometimes we are the older son. Every so often we get to be the dad. Sometimes we're the servants. Sometimes we might be the pig farmer. Stories have this power to make us imagine and reimagine everything. Don't get me wrong, facts are great. I love them. Arguments following rigid, systematic logic are great. Mathematical proofs are useful. I don't really understand them. I have been told they can come in handy. But we are storytelling creatures. We understand ourselves through the stories we tell about ourselves. We understand each other through the stories that we tell about each other. We understand the world through the stories that we tell about the world. And stories tell us more than how things are. They tell us how they can be. They tell us what can change. They present the wonders of possibility to us. Stories are powerful things. And I know that because I know that there are folks who want there to be fewer stories. I know that there are people who do not want our kids, or just folks in general, to hear certain stories. Because if folks hear those stories, they might learn about how the world is and how it could be. They might learn about who they are and who they could be. They might learn who other folks are and who they could be. Stories are powerful, and I know that because there are folks who say those stories are dangerous. But the reality is that we are not always the ones telling the stories. We don't always get to decide which stories are out there. Other folks tell stories to us and for us. Books are stories, movies are stories, TV shows are stories. News broadcasts are stories. Advertisements are stories. And given the season that we are walking into, it is important to remember that political campaigns are stories. They are all attempts to tell you who you are and who you should be, who those folks are and who they should be, how the world is and how it should be, and what you have to do. Take this attitude, buy this product, vote for this person, in order to get from how things are to how things should be. And it is so easy to let other folks tell stories for us. We know this. We know this so well because we are Christians. We are in a church. And there are a lot of folks in this world, in this country, in this town, who tell stories about what Christians are and what they should be, or what churches are and what they should be. And we know that those stories do not always line up with who we are and who we long to be. We know that those stories turn folks off from the story that we want to tell, from the story that I see in this book, a story about coming home, no matter who you are and no matter where you are on life's journey, to extravagant welcome and abundant hospitality and reckless generosity, to enough and more than enough for everyone. And so the question is, how do we tell a better story? We're trying a bit of a new thing this year. At least I'm trying a bit of a new thing this year. Years ago, when I came to this church, we were on a thing called the Revised Common Lectionary. Here are your readings for every week for every church in the world. There will be about 9 of them a week. Figure out how to deal with it. A few years ago, we switched to a thing called the Narrative Lectionary. Kind of a work through of the biblical story. Here are some readings for every church in the whole world. There will be 1 a week. Figure it out. This year, I'm going to try some sermon series. We're in one right now, Stories and Maps. We're going to talk about the power of story, why stories make a difference, and how we can tell better ones. And then we're going to move on to other topics within Christianity, within theology. We're going to talk some about who God is. Give you a hint, God is love. We're going to talk a little bit about what sin is and who Jesus is and who we can be and all those kinds of things. And on the one hand, these are each little series with little sermons inside of them. So if you miss one, don't worry. You can also catch them on YouTube and the website and Facebook and all that if you want. But I'm hoping that there's also a through line all the way through the year that will help us tell a better story, that will help us know a better story, that will give us confidence to share a better story, so that all of the people in this world who have had not so great stories told about them and told for them, who maybe have internalized those not so great stories, can themselves learn to tell a better one. A story about love. Because I truly believe that a story about love, heard and told over and over again until it fills the whole world, can change everything.